the Indian economy is showing clear signs of bouncing back. The historic win by the Modi government last year has given fresh impetus that India's growth story is alive and kicking. Whether it's top industry leaders, foreign investors, or rating agencies, everyone seems to be now veering around the view that India is back in business. At the same time, the newfound confidence is also now being laced off late with some degree of impatience as well as nervousness on whether we will be able to truly deliver on questions being raised really on the strength of our recovery and the pace of the reform process. Hello and welcome to this very, very special panel discussion, the next 10 years gliding or rocketing ahead. I'm Shweta, Rajpal, Kohli, and it's a pleasure to have with us an esteemed panel. With us, Mr. Nitin Gadkari, Minister for Road Transport, Highways and Shipping. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Next to him, Mr. Ravi Uppal, CEO of Jindal Steel and Power. Mr. Sanjay Baru, Director of the International Institute of Strategic Studies. And to my left, Mr. Chandra, Managing Director of Bain Capital. Let me kickstart this discussion by trying to get a sense of whether the next decade will truly belong to India. Mr. Gadkari, whether or not the next decade truly belongs to India will depend to a large extent on the ability of this government to deliver on some tough reforms. Does this government have the bandwidth to go ahead and press the button on some of those tricky and tough reforms, be it the GST bill or the land acquisition bill?
As far as the GST is concerned, already it is pending with the Parliament. And I am confident that probably in this session, we are going to pass that bill. So there is no question arise about GST now. As far as the land acquisition bill is also one of the important things. And as far as the bill is concerned, the 5 amendments are there. And not a single amendment is against the farmer and the poor people. But some people from the media, I am sorry to say, and some politicians, those who don't want the development of this country, creating problem for the country, to stop this process of development, that's why they're creating a political confusion in the mind of the people about this land acquisition bill. I am confident that there will be no problem and we will try our level best to convince the opposition because it is in the interest of the national interest. And suppose there are a lot of ways are open, but ultimately we are very much committed for that and we will see that this bill be passed.
All right, so it's great to see that confidence. You, of course, mentioned the media, but it's the opposition that now seems united on the land acquisition bill. You've, of course, mentioned that you will make sure, and there are a lot of other ways, perhaps a joint session or other ways to push forward. At the same time, your government seems to be suffering from an image perception, being called a soot-boot ki sarkar, a government which is only pro-corporate. How do you deal with these perceptions, and how would you convince the opposition that the land acquisition bill does not hurt the farmers?
From last many years, as far as my party is concerned, and we leader particularly belongs to BJP are concerned, we have got 2 problems. One is image versus reality and ground reality versus the perception. There is a political strategy to create in the mind of the people that we are against minorities. Second thing, we are pro-corporate and pro-rich. We are against the farmers and poor people. And third is that we are against scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. But the one thing is clear. After all these efforts from lot of people, from media, from the opposition party, still our party got the majority. Because the people in India, by and large, they understand what is the true thing, what are the true things, and what is exactly the ground reality. So that I always define it as India and Bharat. This Delhi, Mumbai is India. It is covered by English media, the 0.5 or 1% of people. They are already, I don't criticize anybody. But the main India is in Gaon. Gaon, Garib, Majdoor, Kisan. And those people who know what is to be happen to this country and what need to be happen to this country. So I am confident that the people are understanding. It is in democracy when the one party becomes strong, the other weak party united. That is the rule of the democracy. So it's no makes no doubt.
But you're confident that the land bill will go through in this session itself?
Actually, some of the party already they have supporting is because there is nothing against the farmers. I am farmer. I am from the rural area. I am working with the farmer. I always giving challenge to many people who are opposing it. That let us tell me a single thing in these 5 amendments which is against the farmer. One, we consent clause and SI exempted for defense. Second thing, for low-cost housing. Third, for rural infrastructure. Fourth, for the affordable housing. And somewhere it is from social infrastructure. Actually, this is all in the interest of the rural economy, rural people, the agriculture people, the industrial corridor. Every industry is now in Mumbai or Delhi or Bangalore or Chennai. If there is a decentralization of industry, in every village there is an industry, it creates more employment potential to the rural area. But in the mind of the perception, industrial corridor means it is in the interest of the industry. So somewhere there, the lot of people, they have some misunderstanding, but because of our stand, now the things are clear, and I feel that it will be no problem for us.
All right, it's good to see that confidence coming from you, Mr. Minister. Let me now move on and talk to Mr. Ravi Uppal, someone who really represents a very, very important sector of the economy on the ground reality, as Mr. Nitin Gadkari mentioned. It's fantastic to see those headlines that India is among the fastest growing economies in the world, perhaps the fastest growing, especially after the recent revision in the GDP numbers that we saw. But what is the real ground reality? How are things looking on the ground? Are projects taking off? Are we seeing industrial growth really picking up? Mr. Uppal.
First of all, I must compliment the Honourable Minister that his government has initiated multiple reforms to give a boost to the economy, and especially agree with him that if India has to move forward, that the rural economy must grow, and because that's what's going to generate the disposable income and is going to give a big impetus to the growth of demand in general. As far as industry is concerned, the investment process has started. I must say that the private sector, in the last couple of years, there was attrition in their confidence. It's taking a while for the private sector to bounce back. But in the meanwhile, government obviously has gauged the situation, and they're trying to sort of put a lot of investment to the public sector. I think the private sector will definitely bounce back. And the economy, I'm sure the industrial growth is going to take off. Some of the things that government has done recently, I think they will really go a long way, especially for the mine mineral industry and the industries which are based on the minerals. You know, the MMRDA Act, I'm sure, is going to give a big impetus to the growth of the industry. But I think one single issue, which is very important from the point of view of industry, is the cost of capital.
Right.
And the availability of capital. The capital in this country still costs very much, and it's having a huge impact on the private sector coming forward and making the investments. So I really hope that the government will take some proactive steps to see how the cost of capital can be sort of brought down. And the second thing which is important is, you know, we can't just bank on, you know, 50 to 100 major business houses who keep making all the investments. They also come under a huge amount of pressure. I think what is important is to encourage entrepreneurship, you know, to reduce the barrier for the new generation of entrepreneurs to come. And not only in the e-commerce or the IT sector, where of course, in any case, the investment is low, but I think also in the small and medium sector, where the, you know, the entrepreneurs who get into the industrial sector, they face multiple problems, especially with regard to availability of the working capital to stay in their business. So if the government could take steps to show a little more sensitivity to the concerns of medium and small industry, I think that will also become a big boost to the growth of the major industries, because, you know, industrial clusters are getting created, and the big units, they always have the small and medium sectors which feed into them. So I think that sector especially requires a lot of investment. One, you know, thing which our government is now focusing a lot on, which I think is extremely vital, is skilling of India.
Right.
I think, you know, we find although a lot of people are getting, you know, the conventional degrees and diplomas, but the level of skills which are available for them to make, you know, make a productive contribution to industry is still very limited. I think it has to be a coordinated effort between the public, between the government and the private sector, and that is going to really sort of help us enhance our productivity in a big way.
Mr. Sanjay Baru, if I could come to you on the theme of today's panel discussion, and that's really something that world over people are focusing on. India's growth model. What is the model that India will follow here on for the next 10 decades? Will we be gliding ahead or will we rocket ahead?
Well, first of all, I don't think we'll either glide or rocket.
Okay.
I think we will have a bumpy ride ahead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the problem in our country is that whenever things are going well, we become very euphoric.
Right.
And then when things slow down, we become despondent. From 2003 to 2009, we had 9% growth every year, year on year, and we thought we were going to catch up with China and India was going to be the great next story of the world, etc., etc. After 2012, when the growth slowed down, we were all in despair that, we thought India had lost it. But I take the long view. And the long view is that from 1950 to 1980, for 30 years, the average growth rate of this country was 3.5%. From 1980 to 2000, for 20 years, the average rate of growth was 5.5%.
Right.
From 2000 till now, the average rate of growth has been about 7.5%, roughly. So 3.5, 5.5, 7.5. What's the trajectory? The trajectory is a rising trajectory.
Right.
So India is on a rising trajectory. It has a lot to do in order to be able to sustain this. I don't think I'd waste my time predicting that we'll be like the West in 10 years time from now,
sure.
Predicting that we'll have 9% growth over the next decade, predicting that, things are going to be hunky-dory. No, the ride will be bumpy.
Okay.
There'll be years in which we'll do well, there'll be years in which we won't do well. But the long-term trajectory for India is a positive trajectory. And any investor today will have to look at that long-term. But there's a lot we need to do.
I'd like to take that point forward, and you mentioned that it is going to be a bumpy road ahead. It's clearly up to ministers like Mr. Gadkari, in his case, quite literally to ensure, as the road and transport minister, that the ride ahead is not all that bumpy. But Amit Chandra, if I could come to you, particularly on the upsides and the downsides that India faces right now. You heard Sanjay Baru say it's going to be a bumpy road ahead. At the same time, we're talking about really India being one of the fastest growing economies in the world. There's no taking away from the fact that the India story is being watched by the world. What could be some of the potential upsides and downsides over the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think Shweta, Sanjay set it up really well. I think by and large, folks in the corporate world and investors, I think we are wrong on two counts. We are wrong on both the short term and we are wrong on the medium to long term. We are wrong on the short term because of our impatience with, the results. It didn't take 1 year to bring the India story to a grinding halt. It took 3-4 years of taking your eye off the ball, as Sanjay was pointing it out. It takes a long time to slow a ship down. And I think to expect overnight results is, in my view, bordering on ridiculous.
So you're saying that the impatience being
I think it's very misplaced. I think the impatience is misplaced.
Okay.
I think there are clearly visible signs of green shoots. And I think a lot of people, I think, are wrong with the degree or the expectation that they have for results that they could see in 2015 and even 2016. I also think most of those folks are also wrong about what the medium to long-term potential is. And I completely agree with Sanjay again on this. If you look at the trajectory, as long as we put in the right enablers for growth, there are so many low-hanging fruits in this economy. Gadkari ji spoke about a lot of interesting things, areas where we could do massive import substitution and add it not just to our domestic production, but also, take the pressure off current account deficit and exchange. There's so many opportunities before us that there is no reason why the medium to long-term trajectory cannot be a number in the region of 8 to 10%.
Right.
Again, I think the risk for us will always be that when we get close to that, we again will take our eye off the ball and get overly euphoric as we got overly despondent in the last few years. So at least I think from our vantage point, I have no doubt in saying that India looks like one of the most interesting places in the world to put money to work in.
Right.
The private equity industry accounted for about 40-50% of all FDI in this country. So it was the single biggest chunk of FDI in this country. That number has halved from the peak at an average in the last 3 or 4 years in an economy that's grown 35% in that period. There is no reason why that number cannot triple in the next 3 years as long as we see the right enablers in place. Sure. The ease of doing business is easy. And then think of the multiplier effect of that investment in terms of job creation, in terms of eliminating supply side bottlenecks. So at least I think we are, I would say, probably more bullish today than we've been in the last 8 years that we've been in India.